I've been thinking a lot lately about my students and their motivation to practice. And I believe the reason that's on my mind a lot right now is that my students are about to leave campus to go home for Thanksgiving break. And once they do that, they're not going to return. They're going to stay home until mid-January. So that's pretty unusual to be away from their School of Music community for that long. And I know similar things are happening at music schools all over the country, if not the world. And so I think it's going to be a lot harder to stay motivated to practice these days, although please prove me wrong. But this is why my last episode that I did was on a topic that I hoped would motivate my students to practice, which was describing my own flute community at Oberlin Conservatory. And of course, also, if you're just interested in thinking about organizing your practice time and staying motivated to practice, you might go back and look at our very first episode, FluteTube episode 1, Practice, 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 and just keep pushing yourself to practice. With today's topic, I'm clearly on the same tack of picking something that hopefully will motivate people to practice. I want to talk about personality types and musicians and what your personality type is like on the spectrum of being an introvert or an extrovert. Where do you fit and how can you use that to help motivate yourself to practice? So let's launch into this topic of introverts and extroverts and musicians. I mentioned that it's easier to keep going with your practicing projects when you're part of a community and you're all doing it together. But in fact, that may not be true if you're an introvert. If you're introverted, you might just want to go hole up and be on your own, not disturbed by other people who are going to drain your energy, and just do your own practicing. And if you're in that camp, congratulations, you have a real strength right now. You can capitalize on that and work hard and not feel as lonely or depressed by being away from people. I've seen it estimated that about 1/3 of people are introverts. Who knows for sure, but something like that. And in fact, if you think you're an introvert, or if you know someone who is, a close friend or family members, I would recommend that you read this book called Quiet. I don't own it, so I can't show it to you because I just borrowed it from a family member to read it myself a few years ago. But I think it's very well done and has a lot of great insights about introverts and how introverts can really contribute a lot to society and how sometimes they're overlooked or underappreciated. If you're an extrovert, you're part of the probably 2/3 majority of people out there. So in a lot of ways, that's an advantage because more people understand your personality type. But at the same time, right now, extroverts are hurting more because you're not happy being alone so much. You want to go out and interact with people and socialize more, and that's where you get a lot of energy. So hopefully what I'm going to talk about today is useful information for everyone to have, but frankly, it may be more useful information for extroverts because I'm going to try to help you shift and think towards your introvert side for a bit while you're more on your own. So getting to today's most important point that I want to make about introverts and extroverts. Most people assume that you're either one or the other. You're either over here as an introvert or you're over here as an extrovert. But Carl Jung is the one who first identified this idea of introverts and extroverts. And he did not describe it that way. He described it as a spectrum, that you're more likely to be at one end or the other, but not really at those extremes. Really, you're more somewhere in the middle on that spectrum. He even said, there is no such thing as a pure introvert or extrovert. Such a person would be in the lunatic asylum. So what we want to consider, especially if you feel like you're pretty far on the extrovert side of the spectrum, is how do we move towards the middle of the spectrum and become a little more introverted, if possible, in order to take advantage of all this time you have alone to practice right now. So what we want to figure out together today is what is in the middle of this introvert-extrovert spectrum? How do you kind of gear yourself more towards the middle, especially right now if you are an extrovert? And this is where I'm going to take a seeming detour and talk a little bit about one of my non-flute teachers I had at Juilliard named Mary Anthony Cox. Ms. Cox was legendary at Juilliard. She taught ear training there for many years. She taught there from 1964 to 2013, and really that was the majority of her life, which was 1932 to 2019. Ms. Cox had gone to Paris and studied with Nadia Boulanger, as so many important musicians did. And this is very interesting to me because Nadia Boulanger is one of my very best dead friends. I have a lot of dead friends, and I'll tell you more about them. But for now, it's just important, if you don't know who Nadia Boulanger is, go look her up. She taught so many of the very most influential musicians of the 20th century. And I have to thank Ms. Cox, because when I got to Juilliard, I did not know solfege. I had tested out of ear training in all of my previous music studies, and so I never took ear training. And Ms. Cox told me I must learn solfege. So I took her ear training class for a year at Juilliard, and looking back, I'm so glad I did, because her method of teaching that she developed, which was highly influenced by Nadia Boulanger, truly became legendary. It was part of the Juilliard experience, and I'm glad that I had that experience of taking ear training with her. And also, through Ms. Cox, Nadia Boulanger became my ear training grandma. But in addition to teaching us music, Ms. Cox was constantly telling us about her life philosophies and giving us advice. And I've been thinking lately about one day when she talked about musicians and introverts and extroverts. And basically what she said is that musicians either need to be by nature or by training themselves ambiverts. So that's the answer to what's in the middle of this spectrum. It's the land of the ambivert. And this is why Ms. Cox said that musicians have to be ambiverts. She said, obviously, we need to be happy spending so many hours alone in our practice rooms with our instruments, training ourselves to be fabulous musicians. Also, we have to have rich, deep inner lives, very connected to our own internal experience as humans, so that we have plenty to express through our music. So that's all on the introvert side. But on the extrovert side, we then have to be very happy getting up on stage, being the center of attention, and expressing what we have to say through our music. We need to be really good at bringing out what's inside of ourselves to those around us. And also, it helps enormously to have a musical career if you can develop or naturally have a comfort going out and networking with people, building your career through interacting with others, going to parties, going to social events, attending other people's concerts, and being happy coming up to them afterwards and talking to them. And so you really have to have both sides of your personality be very strong. So in a lot of ways, ambiverts have the best of both worlds. And I feel lucky that I really am an ambivert, but I think that many more people are than realize that they are, because we take these personality tests that categorize us one way or another. But you might be an ambivert like me if you've had this kind of experience. That when you take a personality test, you get a question like, do you draw your energy from being with other people, or do you get energized from being alone? And my answer would always be things like, well, if I'm alone, what am I doing alone? Am I reading a really good book, or am I working on some boring project? Because then I'll get energy by going out and being with people. But if I'm out being with people, who are the people? If it's the right party, I would rather go to a party. So if I'd rather read a book or go to a party, well, it depends on the book and it depends on the party. I will say I come from probably an unusually introverted family, and I love them for that, and I definitely belong in that group. But at the same time, I doubt any of them would argue if I were to say, I feel like I'm the social butterfly of the group. I'm more likely to want to go out and be with people or to organize social activities, that kind of thing. As an ambivert, I feel like I'm not predictably drained by being with people. I'm not predictably recharged by being alone. I may get my energy from other people, or I may feel depressed and sad if I spend too much time alone. So I will defend both my personal time that I need to recharge, but I will also defend my social time when I need to go out and be recharged by seeing my friends. I especially feel lucky to be an ambivert because of what Ms. Cox said about musicians and being ambiverts and how we need to develop both sides of our personality. And it is true that if you're not naturally an ambivert, you can develop both sides of your personality. One thing I've been asked a lot when I've had these tests, especially if it's been in a verbal setting, is people have said, but what are your natural tendencies? What would you do if it weren't part of your job? And for me, it's like both of those tendencies are very natural to me. But you can train yourself to be more comfortable in the middle of that personality spectrum. Especially for the sake of the extroverts out there right now who are struggling to be a little more introverted, I'm going to tell you a few things that I've heard about ambiverts to encourage you to try and move towards your introverted side and enjoy those activities that you can do all by yourself, like practicing. One advantage is that I've heard that ambiverts, it's almost like they're bilingual, that they understand this full spectrum of personality types. They know just what it's like to be an introvert, but also just what it's like to be an extrovert. So they can connect with a wider range of personality types and people because they don't fit squarely into either category of extrovert or introvert. They can be more flexible in different kinds of situations because they can tap into either their extrovert or introvert side, which means that they can also be more emotionally stable or more balanced. They have some professional and personal advantages because they're more adaptable. Because they have this natural balance of introverted and extroverted tendencies, they can engage in very flexible patterns of speaking and listening. And so again, they can kind of connect better with different personality types. I'd be curious to learn from my flute students how many of them see themselves as extroverts, how many see themselves as ambiverts, and if any feel like when you've taken personality tests, you just always end up smack in the middle. Think about it and let me know in the comments if you would like to. Where is it that you get your energy? Do you get it from other people, or do you get it from detaching, being on your own, and recharging? If you're an ambivert, you may seem to be different things to different people. Some people may see you more as an extrovert, while some people see you as an introvert. I've had students come with me to music festivals and things and say, I just always thought you were quiet. You're like this party animal. Depending on who I'm with, who my colleagues are, what the circumstances are, I'm going to be fairly quiet in my office at my university, but I may be more outgoing and gregarious when I'm with friends. But I'll just say again right now, if you feel like you're a pretty extroverted personality type, that's great. That will give you many advantages in the normal world. But right now, while the world just is not really normal, do your best to tap into your introvert side and see how much enjoyment you can get from your own personal practice, and see how much energy you can get from other solitary activities like reading good books and taking walks alone and enjoying nature, but mostly practice.